Hey there guys, I'm back to another game review. Today I am very excited to talk about Marvel's Spider-Man 2 on the PlayStation 5. As someone who is not just a big fan of Spider-Man but also Insomniac Games, this was my most anticipated game of the year. I love Spider-Man 2018 as it's easily one of my top 5 favorite games of all time. The Miles Morales game showed what the PlayStation 5 was capable of while telling a strong narrative for our new Spider-Man. I was closely following Spider-Man 2's development from its initial reveal in 2021 to its full launch last week. A symbiote-centric story that pulls both Peter and Miles' worlds in different directions sounds interesting. Kraven the Hunter has come to New York for his last hunt, and it's up to our Spider-Man to handle it. Harry Osborn is back in Peter and MJ's life, while Miles tries to figure out his college essay and his unfinished business with Martin Lee. The story does some really amazing things with its comic book roots, but does stumble a bit in certain areas. The gameplay has undeniably improved from its predecessor with the addition of the web wings and the parry mechanic. The game is not totally polished, which will lead to some noticeable bugs and glitches. Did Insomniac Games make a game that's worthy to be called Spider-Man 2, or is it more or less the same from the first game? Let's find out. Full spoilers for Marvel's Spider-Man 2.
Let's start with the gameplay as the story will take up most of this video. Like I said, the gameplay has been improved on all fronts. From the start of the Sandman piece, we get to familiarize ourselves with the gameplay of Marvel's Spider-Man 2. From the web swinging to the combat, everything is here and accounted for. The introduction of the abilities with the L1 button has replaced the suit abilities from Marvel's Spider-Man 2018, and it coincides with Miles' Venom powers. Peter gets the spider arms at the start before transitioning into the symbiote powers later on. Fans have debated whether this is a positive or a negative change, effectively changing how the gameplay works with a lesser emphasis on suit powers and gadgets. Personally, this change did take some getting used to. Super limited gadgets to mess around with does suck, but most of the suit powers were kind of bad. Let's face it, you most likely stuck to a few powers that you really liked, and that's it. I personally stayed with the electric gloves because it made taking out groups of enemies super easy. Now, the abilities make hand-to-hand combat a lot more fun, and taking out boss fights a breeze since gadgets don't really work on them. The gadget pool is very small, but the ones they do offer are decent. Insomniac Games tried their best to substitute some of the missing gadgets and features by adding a parry/block mechanic and a new web line. The parry/block button is mapped to the L1 button and needs to be timed correctly for the parry to work. You won't be using the parry mechanic at first, but once you get to the lizard boss fight and so on, you'll know how to parry. Like the new abilities, it takes some getting used to. This is a harsher learning curve since parrying is nearly required to defeat bosses. The indicators with the Spidey sense will go off, making the moment when to parry noticeable. After mastering this new mechanic, you will be taking out bosses and groups of enemies a lot easier. There is no lock-on feature, which makes parrying kind of clunky at times. I don't know what button they would map for the lock-on feature, but having it would make fighting enemies and bosses more streamlined. The web line makes stealth sections more cookie cutter. Because you won't have a ton of gadgets to use, Insomniac Games had to figure out a new way for players to navigate stealth sections. By aiming down and pressing triangle, a web line will shoot out and give Spider-Man a new vantage point to play off of. It's clearly inspired by the Batman Arkham series, but works here for Spider-Man. It's a lot less creative than the gadget combinations, but at least they tried to substitute it. Enemies will notice the web line, so it won't stay active forever depending on where you throw it. Web swinging around in Marvel Spider-Man 2 is even more fun thanks to the power of the PlayStation 5. They're able to load more of the area than before, making web swinging faster. The addition of the web wings means you can keep the horizontal momentum going and crush large gaps where web swinging may not be possible. I'd be hard-pressed to go back to the previous Spider-Man titles because Insomniac Games have honestly perfected it here. They even add more swinging upgrades like the loop-de-loop and corner tether. These moves create more waves to keep the momentum and speed going while web swinging. Also, the slingshot by holding L2 and X to start your swinging is so much fun because you literally launch yourself into the air. The fast momentum web swinging on top of the web wings is so exhilarating in Marvel Spider-Man 2. There's so many new mechanics and button inputs, you'll forget some of them if you don't check the moves list menu often. If there's anything perfect about this game, it has to be the web swinging. The combat is still a ton of fun. The parry mechanic makes dealing with large groups of enemies more manageable because they do throw a lot of enemies at you. The abilities run off of a cooldown, so don't be afraid to use them when they're available. As you play the main adventure, you will gain more abilities. Miles will get the lightning powers and Peter gets the symbiote abilities. All of them are far better than the Venom powers/spider arms, but you can still upgrade them to make them better. I saved a lot of my upgrade points for the symbiote powers with Peter because I really wanted to feel powerful when it came to that part of the story. Speaking of upgrades, Insomniac Games gives you 3 trees to upgrade from, one for each respective Spider-Man and a third one shared for both of them. Really nice touch if you want to upgrade both Spider-Man at once or give an extra boost to Peter or Miles. Either way, there's a lot of enhancements both Spider-Man can receive. Depending on who you like to play as more, you'll likely upgrade their abilities first. Each Spider-Man has their own ultimate ability as well, which you activate by clicking L3 and R3 at the same time. Miles' Mega Venom Blast returns, wiping out the surrounding area of enemies. Peter has the Symbiote Surge, where he gets super strong and unleashes the symbiote's full power. Both are satisfying to use in their own right and build up as you fight enemies. The Symbiote Surge is a lot of fun as you're essentially a god when this mode is active. It's impossible to lose a fight when Peter is hitting this hard. The gadgets are okay, like I mentioned previously. On top of the web shooters, you have the Upshot, the Web Grabber, the Sonic Burst, and the Ricochet Web. I didn't even unlock the Ricochet Web during my playthrough, but the Sonic Burst is useful against the symbiotes, the Upshot is good to set up combos, and the Web Grabber will clump up nearby enemies. Gadgets like the Impact Web and the Trip Mines are completely gone, which does suck, and the ones we do have are mid at best. I wish more gadgets were available to unlock, but the bigger focus is on the abilities, since hand-to-hand combat and fighting waves of enemies is more prominent in Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Furthermore, the focus meter is more balanced or nerfed depending on how you look at it. You can only get 3 focus bars at most, and you can only heal when the bar is full. No more quickly healing a little bit if the focus meter has some juice available. A full bar is required to heal. This also makes using a finisher more risky because you might end up instantly taking damage after, leaving you no heal available. Really nice risk versus reward mechanic that makes Marvel's Spider-Man 2 naturally more difficult. Side missions make a return, but I'm not going to talk about these too much. I still have a ton to do within my playthrough, but the ones I did play were really good. They expanded the missions to add optional side stories like with Mysterio and Wraith. In addition, each side mission feels impactful and personal to our Spider-Man. They're no longer random fetch quests, but actually at the heart of what makes Spider-Man New York's superhero. I can't wait to dive back into the game to finish everything up. Before I talk about the MJ missions, I want to discuss the boss fights, as Insomniac Games have heard the complaints from the last game and gave us some really cinematic boss fights in Marvel's Spider-Man 2. They are huge, bombastic fights that you do not want to miss. Each boss requires the player to learn a new pattern, with each subsequent fight being harder than the last. I do wish the boss fights were spread out more, as the Sandman fight kicks the whole game off, and then you play 7 more hours to fight the Lizard and everyone else follows suit. It would have been cool if there was like 1 or 2 bosses in between the Sandman and the Lizard, but it probably would have taken away from the overall narrative. Still, the boss fights were awesome and brought a fair challenge to Marvel's Spider-Man 2. My favorite has to be the Kraven boss fight into the Symbiote Peter boss fight. Not only are both fights pretty dope, but fighting Symbiote Peter as Miles has been theorized since the game was announced. Insomniac Games delivered on this fight by having it happen immediately after Kraven. Kraven uses the bell to stop you from beating him up, and now you have to use that same bell to stop Peter. Genius level design that I cannot praise enough. Another boss fight I really enjoyed is the Scream boss fight. Not only was this a surprising encounter, but it brought an extra layer of development to Peter and MJ's relationship. Obviously, she hasn't been voicing these complaints to Peter with everything going on between Harry's return and Aunt May's house. The fight brings a great challenge while hashing out the problems MJ and Peter have in their relationship. Super nice touch for the story that could have been done in a dramatic cutscene, but instead we have a boss fight where MJ takes on the Scream persona. The final aspect of the gameplay I want to talk about is MJ's missions. She has been the center of criticism when talking about Marvel Spider-Man 2018. While I still think they're okay missions, it does break the flow of gameplay, especially on reruns. Like everyone else, I dreaded replaying old MJ and Miles missions because the Spider-Man gameplay was just too much fun. Now, in Marvel Spider-Man 2, MJ has the same stun gun from Sable International that slowly upgrades into later missions. The gameplay becomes more engaging with you shooting enemies in addition to stealth takedowns. When you do get caught, you have a chance to run away or fight. It's not an instant death, which makes dying in them feel more like your fault than the game's. One reason why players will like the MJ missions more in Marvel Spider-Man 2 is the placement of them. them. The context of when these levels happen makes more sense. The first one is in the mission called Good Men, where MJ sneaks into Kraven's New Jersey base. We see the improvements Insomniac Games did to the mission to make them more fun, but also the story details and context revealed is absolutely insane. Kraven killing the Vulture and Shocker is crazy. The fact that these characters are now dead in the Insomniac universe because of Kraven adds to his threatening aura. It is a shame they died off screen, but this just adds to the shock value for the player as they continue through this level as MJ. And of course, this is where Peter gets the black suit, making the first part of the mission all worth this ending. The other times you take control as MJ are when the symbiote takes control of Peter's sleeping body in the final mission to steal the meteorite. They aren't just lazily thrown into the story and actually make sense in the grand scheme of things. And once again, they're actually fun to play because of the new gameplay mechanics. Insomniac Games managed to fix another problem players had with the first game, and I love to see it. All in all, the gameplay in Marvel Spider-Man 2 is amazing. While they do take some gadgets away for the sake of the abilities, I believe it's still a good change overall. We might not be as creative in the stealth sequences, throwing a bunch of gadgets at them at once, but the melee combat is so much fun. Fighting enemies with the usual tools alongside the Venom powers and the symbiote abilities is awesome. The parry mechanic isn't perfect, but makes taking out bosses and groups of enemies all the more enjoyable. The web swinging is perfect, and I cannot name anything wrong with it. You truly feel like Spider-Man when you explore the bigger New York playground offered here. Only Insomniac Games can outdo themselves for Marvel Spider-Man 2's gameplay, because this is truly a feat to behold. Now let's talk about the story, as this game goes balls to the wall to tell its version of the symbiote storyline. Instead of going from mission to mission, I'm going to go to every single major character and how their role played out in Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Starting off with our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, how will Miles Morales fit into the story? While Peter is running around managing the symbiote, what will Miles be doing? Well, he has his college essay to worry about, and his personal grudge with Martin Lee reignites. After he escapes the raft transfer, Miles becomes obsessed with Lee and his whereabouts. It's not too interesting for Miles at first because he does take a backseat in Peter's life after Harry enters the picture. Miles' mandatory missions, for the most part, are opening up side activities to do later on. The mission with Black Cat is pretty dope as it saves her from Kraven's potential hunt, but otherwise, the rest of Miles' missions are kind of filler content. The missions are quote-unquote friendly neighborhood Spider-Man centric, just like the side missions from the Miles Morales game. But because Peter's story is at the center of attention, it's very clear Miles got the short end of the stick. They do try to weave Miles back into the story whenever possible, but a stronger balance between the two would have been nice. How they would do it, I have no clue, because the symbiote story requires a heavy focus on Peter and Harry's relationship. To have Miles' problems intertwined with the symbiote stuff might have had the story be messy in its pacing. Still, once Miles confronts Martin Lee, it starts to get good. Instead of enacting his revenge and killing Lee during their fight in Kraven's arena, he gives Lee a way out in hopes he contacts the other Spider-Man. The scene where Miles is trapped in Lee's world until he faces the fact that Miles is holding himself back is excellent. Lee slowly starts to reform himself and caps it all off when he saves Peter by giving him his power for the anti-venom suit. Miles doesn't forgive Lee for what he did, but he's able to move on from the hatred and anger he holds towards him. It's a lot for Miles to carry on his shoulder, and to help Lee in bettering himself and finding his second chance, amazing. I didn't expect Martin Lee to play such a strong role in Miles' story aside from the boss fight, but to continue his character arc and trying to do good again, and Miles is the reason for it, is perfect, emphasizing his role as the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Moving into Peter's story, it heavily revolves around Harry's return and the symbiote. This is the storyline everyone has been waiting for, and I love what Insomniac Games did here. Taking elements from other Spider-Man media and creating this narrative has been fantastic. Albeit not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. When Harry is introduced, we get the vibe of their friendship when we get to play as a younger Peter Parker sneaking around Midtown High after hours with Harry. They are not only trying to receive their USB drive, but this is the day Harry finds out about his mother's illness. It serves two sides of the coin to strengthen Peter and Harry's friendship, while also showing a significant moment where their dream to heal the world stems from. As we continue, we get to see their friendship blossom like Harry never left. Them working together at the Emily May Foundation is where they always dreamt of being. But Like all good storytelling, why build it up if you can't tear it down? Marvel's Spider-Man 2 really takes its time to set up Harry Osborn. After his absence from the previous game, Insomniac Games did a stellar job introducing Harry and his goals in the story. When the symbiote shows itself, he's excited to have superpowers like his best friend who just revealed himself as Spider-Man. For their first mission together, whether Peter wanted it or not, it was saving Tombstone. They also take the liberty of using the Agent Venom armor, which I fanboyed over when I saw it. I mean, come on, it's a subtle way to hint at Harry's eventual transformation as Venom without explicitly saying it. How the symbiote transfers from Harry to Peter is expertly placed. They did all this time to set up their friendship. Peter's obsession with the suit will now tear it down. Essentially dying to Kraven in his first encounter, Peter is only saved by Harry's symbiote attaching to him. Such a memorable mission that climaxes the whole game's story. As Harry becomes sick again, Peter is having the time of his life with the symbiote, making his behavior more aggressive and selfish in his desires as Spider-Man. When the Emily May Foundation blows up, Peter says it doesn't matter because they have the lizard antidote. Harry views the situation differently, as this is the symbol of their dream to heal the world together. Obviously, their lines of thinking are different, and this puts a dent in their friendship. After the night the symbiote took Peter's sleeping body to fight the hunters, this is where Peter burns all of his bridges. That apartment scene is crazy because Peter gives zero fucks about his friends.
Why don't you pop some more pills and say what you really feel?
Hey.
Yuri Lowenthal at this point is ruthless in his portrayal as Peter Parker, giving a performance of a lifetime and should easily be in contention for top 5 Spider-Man actors today. After burning his bridge with Harry, we're set up perfectly for Venom to enter the story. I already talked about the Kraven boss fight into Symbiote Peter boss fight, but the story element sprinkled in there is just peak fiction. Miles being the one to save Peter emphasizes the be greater together tagline. Insomniac Games could do no wrong with this back-to-back boss fight setup. When Harry finally dons the symbiote once more, we finally meet Venom. Making Harry Venom in this story makes sense because of his personal connection with Peter. Every great Venom story has a Peter Parker to hate. If you've watched the Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon, you would know. In Marvel Spider-Man 2, it's no different. While the hatred doesn't run deep, it's enough for Venom to cause chaos in New York. This final act of the story is where some players dislike it. They aren't fond of how Insomniac Games adapted the Web of Shadows storyline where the symbiote invasion hits New York. It's not because the concept is lame, it's an amazing premise. However, it does feel rushed. It's kind of similar to the Devil's Breath situation. Suddenly Otto unleashes this deadly force upon New York and Peter wraps it up within 2 hours worth of gameplay. Similarly, it's set up here where the symbiote invasion wraps up within 3 hours worth of gameplay. Hence, the 3-hour runtime is nowhere near what I would have wanted from a symbiote invasion storyline. The story moves really fast to get to the finale against Venom. What the Spider-Men do in between all makes sense, like saving their loved ones from the symbiotes or Venom himself. The dining room scene with Peter, MJ, and Harry is outright diabolical. I was hoping we would get a scene like this when Harry was confirmed to be Venom, and it delivered. The surprise of Scream entering the fray was great, and like I said, a superb way to fix Peter and MJ's relationship problems. Unlike the first game, the scope of a symbiote invasion feels a lot bigger and should deserve game time worthy of it. However, I do see where Insomniac Games are coming from, as we're approaching well over 12 hours into the game, and we should start to wrap things up. This would have been the studio's only opportunity to adapt this story without having players to wait for DLC or another sequel. A tricky situation for sure, but the end product is still good. Not great or amazing, but it works. They pulled assets from Donny Cates' Venom run in 2018, and I couldn't be happier. As someone who read this series for like 30 issues or so, seeing elements like the Venom wings and the symbiote swirl was awesome. I still stand by the pacing feeling a bit rushed and could have used 1 more hour or so to flesh everything out. Like, imagine if we had a mission where we play as Venom again, but we have to stop Peter and Miles before they receive the anti-Venom suit. That would have been crazy and should have taken at least 1 more hour of playtime. Before I talk about the ending, I want to discuss Kraven the Hunter because he is a maniac in this game. Most of the Kraven adaptations I'm familiar with are the Ultimate Spider-Man comics and the Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon, both featuring poor versions of the character from my understanding. Marvel Spider-Man 2 has a version of Kraven that really brings him to the forefront as one of the best Spider-Man villains. Having him essentially hunt down Spider-Man's foes and killing them is a dope way to show his threatening aura. He is not messing around, and the first scene where he kills Scorpion is so cold. And learning about the fate of the Vulture and Shocker during MJ's first mission will forever be a memorable moment for this game. Learning more about his backstory and why he's on his last hunt because he's going through chemotherapy. He would much rather die in a gruesome battle than die because his body gave out. That's a motive that fits well with Kraven, and I was entertained by him every time he was on screen. Now for the ending bits and sort of what's to come for Insomniac's Spider-Man universe. First up, Miles' suit is kind of trash. I'll just say it. The blue bits are a little overpowering when his main colors have always been black and red. If the blue was a little more subtle, it would have been fine. The hair still bothers me, but I'm not going to talk about that. Harry being in a coma, setting up Norman Osborn to become the Green Goblin for Spider-Man 3 has me excited. I had a feeling this is where the story was going by how Insomniac Games was setting everything up so far, but to have him join forces with Otto Octavius, oh my god, his line to confirm that the next game will be the final chapter is exciting because I don't want Insomniac Games to stick to Spider-Man forever. They have done some of their best work with these games, but they are a very talented team and shouldn't stick to one franchise forever. Miles Morales becoming the only Spider-Man of New York is nice. I felt like Peter might die at some point because that's what happens in the comics, but Insomniac Games are very good at not killing characters off for later stories. Look at Martin Lee's usage. They could have killed him off at the end of Marvel's Spider-Man 2018, but they had a plan for his future. Peter retiring might seem sudden, but he did mention talking to Miles after securing the Emily May Foundation job, but that never happened. Don't worry about Miles running things solo because Peter will always provide insight whenever he needs it. Also, they did tease Cindy Moon in the post-credit scene, so I guess that's how we'll get 3 Spider people in Spider-Man 3. I'm glad they're straying away from Spider-Gwen despite her popularity. Insomniac Games are truly crafting their own continuity, and I love to see it. As a whole, Marvel's Spider-Man 2 story manages to deliver an amazing symbiote-centric story featuring 2 Spider-Men. Yes, Miles' story isn't the greatest. Yes, the last act feels rushed, but they still do a lot of things right here. Harry's character arc as a whole is well done. They take their time to develop Harry and Peter's friendship before tearing it all down. The villains in both Venom and Kraven especially are threatening forces both Spider-Men need to deal with. Using Martin Lee to enhance Miles' arc was very smart, and I'm glad Lee played a big role in the game's story. While the story of Marvel Spider-Man 2 is not perfect, it still has some amazing moments and character arcs that Spidey fans will continue to look back on for years to come. Last but not least, let's talk about the performance for this game. The game looks gorgeous on the PlayStation 5, and without its tech, the web swinging and loading times wouldn't be this fast. The motion capture and performances are all stellar. The in-game cutscenes do look off at times, but they're still good. I can't find a single line or character who didn't give it their all for Marvel's Spider-Man 2. On the technical side of things, the game doesn't run the smoothest. They already patched out the white cube bug where players who played for extensive hours saw their character get replaced by a white cube. I ran into a number of visual bugs and glitches that were not this, but characters would phase into the wall, or I would have to restart from checkpoint to fix the problem. Everything could be solved with a simple restart from checkpoint, but it is still annoying that these bugs are in the game.
In conclusion, Marvel's Spider-Man 2 does some really amazing things for the franchise, giving fans the best web-swinging action thanks to the power of the PlayStation 5. The combat does add some new features like the abilities, but takes a ton of gadgets away. The boss fights and side activities have been improved tenfold, giving the player a more satisfying playthrough. The story is fairly solid all around. Harry Osborn is well placed into the story like he has always been in the universe, with some narrative choices like in the final act and Miles' first half of the story not being that great. Fans can still enjoy Marvel's Spider-Man 2 and what it has to offer. Not a totally polished experience on the PlayStation 5, I'm too much of a fan that I can look past this game's flaws. Marvel's Spider-Man 2 lived up to everything I could have hoped for, and then some. This is my choice for Game of the Year, and I cannot wait to see what Marvel's Wolverine has to offer whenever Insomniac Games are ready to show it. And yeah, that is all I have for today. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you guys want more videos like this, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. I upload new videos on Saturdays. You can follow me on social media. I'm at TV Sonic Gaming on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, pretty much everything. And you can check out my podcast called The Travis and Damien Podcast. We talk about games, movies, and anime every other week. If you guys want to watch episode 124, we have an hour-long discussion on Spider-Man 2, so you don't want to miss that. But yeah, that is all I have for today. Thank you for watching this video once again, and I'll see you guys next time with more videos.